Sonia stood frozen for a beat after the door slammed, her palms still resting on the edge of her desk. The air in the room felt heavier, the silence almost too loud. Her staff lingered in the hallway beyond the glass wall, eyes darting away when she finally turned toward them. "Clear my schedule," she said. Voice clipped no one dared to question. She sank into her chair, but the leather felt uncomfortably warm, as if it had absorbed the heat of her pulse. Liam's voice, sharp, unyielding, kept echoing in her mind. "You're so afraid of being wrong? You'd rather build walls than bridges?" The words scraped at her, leaving behind a faint sting she didn't want to acknowledge. By mid-afternoon, HR had sent a terse message confirming that Liam Rivera's profile had been withdrawn from consideration. Sonia read it twice before closing her laptop, harder than necessary. Down on the street, Liam emerged from the revolving doors without looking back. The sunlight caught the sharp line of his jaw as he pulled his jacket tighter, muttering something under his breath. He had no plan, no job, and no reason to expect he'd ever see Sonia again. But as he walked away, he caught himself glancing at the building's reflection in a shop window. In her office above, Sonia poured herself a glass of water she didn't drink. She told herself it was over. But deep down, she knew she hated loose ends, and Liam Rivera was nothing if not a loose end. 3 weeks later, Sonia wasn't thinking about Liam Rivera at all, or so she told herself. It was a Thursday evening, the kind of late spring dusk, when the city hummed with a low, steady energy. She had agreed reluctantly to attend a charity gala for one of their corporate partners. She arrived in a black silk gown, her hair pinned with clinical precision. Every detail calculated to project control. The ballroom was all warm light and polished wood. Glasses clinking, polite laughter echoing off high ceilings. She was halfway through a conversation with a venture capitalist when she caught sight of a man across the room, standing near the silent auction tables. Her chest tightened before her mind could form his name. Liam, not in his worn leather jacket this time, but in a dark suit that fit him almost too well. The raw edge was still there in the set of his shoulders, in the way he scanned the room like he didn't care if he belonged, but there was something else now. Composure. Their eyes locked. And for one suspended moment, the noise of the gala thinned to nothing. He moved first, threading his way through clusters of guests until he was standing a breath away. "Small world," he said, his voice lower, calmer. But still carrying that undercurrent of challenge, Sonia lifted her glass, letting the stem balance perfectly between her fingers. "Small city," she replied coolly. "Some of us have more. Staying power." His smile was faint, but it wasn't friendly. "And some of us don't need to hide behind glass walls to matter." Before she could answer, someone called her name from across the room, breaking the moment. But as she turned away, she caught the faintest trace of a smirk on his lips, the kind that promised this wasn't over. Later that evening, the gala had wound down into smaller circles of laughter and quiet conversations. Sonia had excused herself from the main crowd, gliding along the side balcony that overlooked the city skyline. The air was cooler here, soft with a light breeze that carried the faint scent of jasmine from nearby planters. She hadn't expected anyone to follow. "Fancy seeing you again." Liam's voice came from behind her, low, smooth, dangerous in its casualness. Sonia didn't turn immediately. She let the silence hang, letting him wait. Finally, she pivoted, her expression unreadable. "You're persistent," she said, voice clipped. "I call it opportunistic," he replied, stepping closer. The lights caught the sharp angles of his face, the confident tilt of his chin. "You throw a party, I show up. You hide, I find you. Seems fair." Sonia crossed her arms, her body still rigid with the instinct to defend herself. "And why are you really here, Liam? To make fun of me in front of the rich and polite?" He shook his head, a faint laugh escaping. "No, I'm here because you irritate me, Sonia." He paused, watching her carefully, letting the words sink in. "Not in a bad way. Not in a way you'd even like to admit. You're too sharp, too smart, too in control. And I don't like that I can't break it. Sonia's lips twitched. Break it, she asked, eyebrow rising. I think you're confusing control with boredom. Maybe I am, he said, stepping closer until she could feel the heat radiating off him. But maybe it's more than that. Maybe I just want to see if you'll let someone in, someone real. Not staff, not investor, not anyone else, just me. Her heart skipped a beat, and she quickly turned her gaze to the skyline, forcing her thoughts away from him. "Do you make it sound easy?" she said softly. "It's never easy," he admitted, voice dropping almost to a whisper. "But it's worth it." Sonia's hand unconsciously brushed the railing. She didn't answer immediately. She couldn't. There was tension there, dangerous and electric, something she'd tried to ignore for weeks. And yet, standing there, just the two of them away from the crowd, she realized she had never truly wanted to. Liam smiled faintly, sensing her hesitation. "I'll give you time," he said, a promise laced with challenge. "Don't take too long. Opportunities like this, they don't wait." He stepped back, giving her just enough space to breathe, and disappeared into the ballroom crowd, again leaving Sonia staring at the skyline. Her mind and heart in chaotic sync. The city lights reflected in Sonia's eyes as she stood on the balcony long after Liam disappeared back into the crowd. Her mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts. Arya, Vanessa's insistence that she live a little, the long hours, the endless responsibilities, and now Liam. Her phone buzzed softly in her clutch. She hesitated before opening it, expecting a text from her assistant or maybe a missed call from a client. Instead, it was a photo Arya, smiling wide, standing beside her grandmother in a sunlit park. The caption, simple: "Miss you, Mom. I'm learning." Sonia's chest tightened. Her daughter was growing, adapting, surviving. And yet every fiber of her being ached to hold her close. She tucked the phone back into her clutch and exhaled slowly, forcing herself to focus. "You're thinking too much," a familiar voice murmured beside her. Sonia didn't need to turn to know it was Vanessa. "You've been pacing out here for nearly 20 minutes, staring at the skyline like you're solving world hunger." "Considering a lot," Sonia admitted, shoulders slumping. "Slightly, yes. Work, life, your new driver." Vanessa's eyes sparkled with knowing mischief. Sonia raised an eyebrow. "Don't. Too late," Vanessa said, smirking. "You can feel it, can't you? That little spark he leaves behind? And don't tell me you're going to pretend you didn't enjoy being challenged. He got under your skin." Sonia's jaw tightened, but she couldn't deny the truth. "It's complicated," she muttered, voice barely audible. "Everything with you is complicated." Vanessa teased lightly, placing a hand on her friend's shoulder. "But you know what? You've earned the right to a little chaos. You've earned the right to want something for yourself without guilt, without rules. Even if it's just K, a man who can drive and irritate you in equal measure." Sonia let out a small laugh, the tension in her shoulders easing fractionally. "You're impossible." "Maybe," Vanessa said with a sly grin. "But sometimes impossible is exactly what we need." Sonia glanced back at the skyline one more time, the wind tugging at her hair. Somewhere deep down, she felt the stirrings of something she hadn't allowed herself in years: possibility. Not just with Liam, but with life, with spontaneity, with moments that weren't scheduled, calculated, or controlled. Her phone buzzed. Again, and this time it wasn't Arya, it was a calendar alert. A gala follow-up meeting, investors calling at 10 a.m. Sonia smiled faintly, a small, rare curve of her lips. Maybe she could handle this chaos after all. And maybe, just maybe, she could handle Liam too. The next morning, the sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sonia's office as the sleek, black vehicle pulled smoothly into the basement garage. Liam stepped out, adjusting his jacket and glancing at the polished car with a nod of approval. Today was his first real day, and despite the nerves, he carried himself with the same quiet confidence that had gotten him hired. Inside, Sonia was already reviewing her notes for the day's investor calls. The moment she heard the soft knock at the door, she didn't look up. "Come in," she said sharply. Voice clipped. Liam entered, standing straight, hands loosely clasped behind his back. "Good morning, Miss Arauco. Ready for your first ride with me?" Sonia finally glanced up, her expression unreadable. "Let's see if you can keep up," she replied, standing and grabbing her leather briefcase. She didn't offer a smile, but Liam noted the slight tilt of her head, a small, almost imperceptible acknowledgement that she expected him to perform. The ride was silent at first. Sonia went through the day's schedule, her voice calm, authoritative, rehearsed. Liam navigated the traffic with ease, anticipating turns, weaving smoothly through congested streets, and expertly timing lights. "You drive well," Sonia said. After a few blocks, breaking the silence, Liam glanced at her briefly, a small smirk playing on his lips. "I get the feeling you didn't hire me just for my driving." Sonia arched an eyebrow, but said nothing. He chuckled softly, sensing the wall she had carefully built around herself. The office building loomed ahead, glass reflecting the morning sun. Sonia collected her things and stepped out, pausing at the door to glance back at him. "You'll wait here," she instructed. "I don't need conversation unless necessary." "Yes, ma'am," Liam replied smoothly, hiding the spark of amusement that danced in his eyes. The day passed in a blur of calls, presentations, and back-to-back meetings. Liam stayed discreetly in the background, yet Sonia found herself aware of his presence, the quiet steadiness that seemed to exist just beyond the chaos she controlled. By late afternoon, the weight of her schedule began to press down. "Miss Arauco, I've got a coffee stop on the way back, unless you'd like me to wait," Liam asked, his tone casual but attentive. Sonia hesitated. "Fine," she said finally, realizing she could use a small moment to breathe. The ride home was quieter, softer. The city slowed as evening approached, and for the first time that week, Sonia allowed herself to relax slightly in the passenger seat. Liam drove with precision, but there was an ease to his movements, a calm confidence that contrasted sharply with the rigid control Sonia maintained over her life. "You've got a way of making chaos seem manageable," she said, almost to herself. Liam glanced at her, eyebrow raised. "I could say the same about you." She didn't respond immediately, just stared out the window at the streaks of gold and pink in the sky. Maybe Vanessa was right. Maybe she didn't need to control everything all the time. Maybe a little unpredictability, a little challenge, could remind her what it felt like to live instead of just survive. As the car pulled into her driveway, Sonia turned to him. "Tomorrow, same schedule." "Don't be late." "I'll be here," he said with a small, knowing grin. She didn't smile, not fully. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of curiosity, the tiniest hint of anticipation. And Liam caught it, just for a moment. Inside the house was quiet, too quiet. Sonia removed her shoes, poured a glass of scotch, and stood at the balcony watching the city lights come alive. Somewhere deep down, she wondered how long it would take before this quiet life of hers was shaken completely, and whether she was ready for it. The next morning, Sonia's phone alarm buzzed sharply at 6:15 a.m. She groaned softly. Pushing herself upright, heels of her palms pressing into her eyes, Liam was already downstairs, leaning casually against the sleek black car in the garage, arms crossed, watching the street like a sentinel. "You're early," Sonia muttered as she descended, her robes swaying lightly with each step. "I like being prepared," Liam replied, smirk curling at the corner of his lips. "Missed trains, traffic, unexpected meetings. You know the drill?" Sonia raised an eyebrow, still bleary-eyed but intrigued by his composure. "You realize this isn't a school trip, right? It's a corporate day." He chuckled softly. "Trust me, Miss Arauco, I get the difference." The ride into the city was filled with the subtle hum of the engine, the occasional soft click of traffic lights changing, and the faint scent of fresh coffee from the thermos Sonia had insisted. "You keep in the car, you're organized," Liam observed. Eyes on the road, but voice casual. "Everything in its place, every meeting timed down to the second. Impressive." Sonia's lips pressed together. It has to be. Chaos is a luxury I can't afford. He glanced at her quickly, noting the faint crease in her brow, the slight tension in her shoulders. You make it sound like chaos is the enemy. 'Cause it is, she said flatly, eyes back on the skyline ahead. There was a pause. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. Maybe you just haven't met the right kind of chaos yet. She frowned, confused and slightly amused. What does that even mean? Liam just smiled, eyes forward, letting the words linger between them, heavy with implication. Sonia shook, her head slightly, choosing not to respond, but she felt it aflutter, subtle and unwelcome. Deep in her chest, at the office, Liam slipped into his routine seamlessly, opening doors, parking cars, and making himself almost invisible, but somehow always present at the right moment. Sonia's eyes flicked to him occasionally, noting his posture, the quiet precision of his movements. By midday, her schedule left her frazzled. Calls, emails, investors each, more demanding than the last. Liam waited patiently outside her office, quietly adjusting his tie, arms crossed, watching the hallway. He didn't need instructions. He knew when she would emerge, when a call was urgent, when a glass of water was necessary. Finally, Sonia stepped out, briefcase in hand, face tight with concentration. Liam stepped forward instinctively, opening the door. Miss Arauco, he said softly, almost reverently. She froze for a moment, noticing the subtle respect in his tone. Thank you, she muttered, her voice just above a whisper. It was the first genuine acknowledgement he had received all day. The ride home was quieter, almost companionable. Sonia stared out the window, letting the city blur past. Liam watched her from the driver's seat, careful not to intrude, but sensing the crack in the armor she wore so diligently. You ever take a day off? He asked suddenly, tone casual but probing. She didn't answer immediately. I don't believe in days off, she replied finally, voice low, almost tired. He smiled. Faintly, maybe that's your problem. Sonia glanced at him briefly, surprised at the edge of challenge in his words. He wasn't questioning her authority or mocking her control, he was challenging her, daring her to see a different perspective. The car rolled into the driveway and Sonia reached for the handle. For a brief moment she hesitated, then sighed. Stepping out, Liam parked, engine off, and for the first time that day, they walked toward the house side by side, the unspoken tension between them buzzing faintly in the air. Inside, the house was quiet again. Sonia poured herself a drink, and Liam remained in the foyer, watching her from a distance, patient, careful, almost calculating. He didn't need to speak. Sonia felt it anyway. The subtle shift, the presence of someone who could match her. Someone who could push, tease, and maybe, just maybe, break through her walls. She sipped her scotch, eyes on the glass. And for the first time in weeks, she wondered if she might just be ready to see what chaos could look like when it wasn't a threat, but a possibility. Evening fell softly over the Arauco residence, painting the walls in amber and deepening shadows. In the corners of the sleek, polished rooms, Sonia remained in the living area, perched on the edge of the leather sofa, glass in hand, scrolling through emails with a tight jaw. Liam had moved to the kitchen, quietly refilling the water glasses, careful not to make a sound that would interrupt her focus. You don't eat, do you? He asked casually, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. Sonia looked up, her eyes meeting his, sharp and assessing. I'll eat when I need to. Right now, I need to think. Thinking doesn't always happen on an empty stomach, he said lightly, but there was an edge beneath his calm tone. I've read that people who starve themselves of food often starve themselves of other things too. She blinked at him, caught off guard by the insinuation. Other things? She asked, voice measured but wary. He leaned a little closer, the faint scent of aftershave mingling with the kitchen air. You know, life, fun, chaos. You hide behind the work because it's safe, but safe gets lonely. Sonia set her glass down slowly, a part of her resisting, another part intrigued. "You think you know me?" she said softly, almost a challenge. "I don't," he admitted, shrugging. "But I know the way people look when they're on the edge of letting someone in. The way their eyes soften, even for a fraction of a second. I saw it in the car today." Her eyes flicked to him, then away, back to her email. A flush crept over her cheeks she refused to acknowledge. "And what am I supposed to do with that?" she asked flatly, though her voice betrayed the tiniest hint of curiosity. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, until the distance between them was charged with something unspoken. "Maybe nothing. Or maybe let someone else carry the weight for a little while." Sonia swallowed hard, sensing the underlying challenge in his words. She was used to controlling everything, every meeting, every project, every interaction. But Liam wasn't trying to control her. He was offering her a choice, and for some reason, that felt far more dangerous. She finally broke the silence, her voice quiet, almost vulnerable. "You're infuriating. And you like it," he replied, a teasing smirk tugging at his lips. Her eyes narrowed, though there was a spark of amusement buried in the intensity. "I don't like being unsettled." "Good," he said softly, stepping back just enough to respect the line but leaving tension in the space between them. "You should be unsettled. Keeps life interesting." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the air thick with words neither dared to speak. Then Sonia finally lifted her glass in a silent toast, her lips pressing together in a restrained smile. "To chaos," she murmured, her voice almost lost in the quiet of the room. "To chaos," he echoed, a faint smile tugging at his own lips. And in that small, fleeting acknowledgement, something shifted. The walls weren't crumbling, they were cracking, just enough for possibility to seep through. Outside, the city lights glimmered, oblivious to the small electric storm brewing in a quiet house, where two very different people had begun to see each other not as threats, not as inconveniences, but as something that might just make life a little unpredictable. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sonia's office, bouncing off polished surfaces and casting sharp lines across the hardwood floors. She sat behind her desk, meticulously reviewing contracts, but her mind kept drifting to the night before. Liam, his smirk, the way he didn't bow to her authority, the way he'd unsettled her in ways no boardroom challenge ever had. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, not looking up. Liam stepped in, impeccably dressed again, though today the fit of his blazer accentuated his broad shoulders rather than masking them. He held a clipboard, a pen tucked neatly behind his ear, looking every bit the professional she expected, yet the cocky ease in his stance told her otherwise. "Morning, Miss Rocco," he said, voice calm. "Your car is ready, scheduled for the day in your inbox, and I've double-checked the traffic reports. You'll get to every meeting on time." Sonia looked up finally, her brow slightly raised. "You don't just drive. You plan my life now." "Plan around your life," he corrected smoothly, setting the clipboard on her desk. "And I drive. Those are the two rules. Everything else is optional." Sonia arched a brow, a hint of amusement tugging at her lips despite herself. "Optional. Huh, that's convenient. Very convenient," he replied, leaning casually against the desk. "For both of us." She studied him, noting the way he didn't flinch under her gaze, the way he wasn't intimidated by her authority. And something inside her stirred part admiration, part annoyance, and part curiosity she wasn't ready to name. "All right, Mr. Cox," she said finally, pushing her chair back. "Let's see if you can keep me on schedule today. And don't disappoint me." "Wouldn't dream of it," he said smoothly, picking up the car keys from the desk. The ride downtown was silent at first, punctuated only by the occasional click of traffic lights and the soft hum of the tires on asphalt. Sonia kept her eyes on the city outside, reviewing her slides in her mind. Liam, however, had a quiet awareness, observing the flow of the streets. anticipating her thoughts without saying a word. After a few minutes, he broke the silence, casual but pointed. You know, you're different when you're not in a boardroom. Sonia shot him a glance. One eyebrow arched. Different how? Less untouchable, he said, shrugging. More human. And honestly, it's kind of refreshing. She turned fully toward him, lips pressed into a thin line. Refreshing? Is that what you call it? Smirked, eyes glinting with mischief. Call it noticing that the queen isn't just a title. She's a person. Sonia shook her head, a small, reluctant smile tugging at her lips. Don't get used to it, Mr. Cox. Too late, he said lightly. But the softness in his tone lingered longer than his words suggested. By the time they arrived at her first meeting, Sonia realized something. She hadn't been this aware of a presence beside her in years. Not a colleague, not an assistant, not even an investor. Liam wasn't just driving her. He was part of the rhythm of her day, a variable she hadn't anticipated but couldn't ignore. And somewhere, the quiet corners of her mind, Sonia knew that the real challenge was just beginning. The first meeting of the day was at a sleek downtown high-rise, glass walls reflecting the morning sun. Sonia strode into the boardroom with her usual precision, laptop in hand, heels clicking against the polished floor. Investors and executives greeted her politely, some with cautious smiles, some with subtle nods. She was in her element, Liam, followed behind, hands folded loosely, standing near the doorway. He didn't speak unless spoken to, but his presence was impossible to ignore. Sonia noticed how he scanned the room, aware of every exit. Every potential distraction a protector, a sentinel, and yet he carried it like he belonged there. As the presentation began, Sonia moved with fluid authority, clicking through slides, fielding questions, projecting confidence. Yet midway through a particularly tense negotiation about merger terms, a question came from a skeptic investor. And what guarantees do we have that your projections will hold under market volatility? He asked sharply. Sonia answered poised, citing data and charts, her voice steady. But Liam, still standing at the back, leaned slightly forward, his eyes narrowing. He noticed a delivery slip on the corner of the tabula, minor detail, but one that could have caused confusion if misread by someone else. Miss or a co, he said suddenly, voice low but firm. That slip contradicts your last chart. May want to address that? The room went quiet. Sonia froze for half a second, glancing at the slip, then back at him. Her cheeks flared slightly gnawed from embarrassment. But from the shock of someone daring to challenge her mid-dash presentation, she took a measured breath, smiled faintly, and replied, "Thank you, Mr. Cox. You're right. Let me clarify. Her?" Voice regained its usual strength as she corrected the discrepancy, subtly redirecting the attention back to her. Liam's smirk was barely noticeable, but it was there, almost teasing. She shot him a look, sharp and controlled. After the meeting, as the room emptied, Sonia turned to him, her voice low and steady. "Do you always feel the need to insert yourself like that?" He shrugged, casual, unapologetic. "I don't insert myself. I prevent disasters." "You nearly missed one." She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You nearly embarrassed me." He met her gaze evenly. "Or saved you. Depends on how you look at it." Sonia's lips pressed into a thin line. She wanted to be irritated, to assert her control, to put him back in his place. But instead, a reluctant respect flickered beneath the surface. He was good. Too good, and dangerous in a way that made her pulse quicken. "Don't think this gives you carte blanche," she said finally, voice cold but measured. "I don't think," he said smoothly. "I know. But it doesn't hurt to remind you that even queens can stumble." Sonia's chest tightened at the words. She turned sharply and walked to the car, heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Liam followed, hands in his pockets, silent but ever present. During the drive back, Sonia stared out the window, contemplating the meeting. He was competent, undeniably useful, But there was an edge to him, a challenge she hadn't felt in years. The thought made her stomach twist in ways she didn't like admitting. "You handled that well?" Liam said quietly after a stretch of silence. Sonia glanced at him briefly, eyes hard. "Don't start praising me now. It'll make you insufferable." He chuckled softly, but his gaze remained steady, almost daring her to react. And for the first time that week, Sonia realized she wasn't just navigating business strategy or boardroom politics. She was navigating Liam Cox, and somehow she knew that was going to be far more complicated. Back at the office, the afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long, sharp lines across the floor. Sonia returned to her sweet heels, clicking with authority, but her mind lingered on Liam. That subtle edge he carried, knowing when to speak, when to step back, kept echoing in her thoughts. She set her bag down with a faint sigh, closed the door, and poured herself a second glass of scotch. "No ice." Liam, meanwhile, leaned against the far wall, arms crossed casually, pretending to review a document on the clipboard he had borrowed from reception. But his gaze never left her. He was patient, observant, infinitely aware, qualities that unnerved Sonia more than she cared to admit. "I don't need a babysitter," she said finally, voice steady but layered with subtle irritation. He lifted an eyebrow, lips curling. "Slightly, neither do the first, but even the best can use a backup now and then." She turned sharply, eyes flashing. "Backup? You think you're my backup?" He shrugged, relaxed, unshaken. "Call it whatever you like. I'm here to make sure things don't go sideways. You'll thank me when the next investor calls." Sonia stared at him for a long moment, the weight of his calm confidence pressing against her. She wanted to be annoyed, wanted to remind him that she ran her own life, her own company. And yet there was an undeniable pull in, almost magnetic, tension that made her stomach tighten. "Fine," she said finally, voice clipped. "You stay out of my way. I handle everything else." He smirked, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "We'll see about that." The next day, as Sonia prepared for another high-stakes meeting, Liam followed her to the car, quietly observing as she organized her notes. Her schedule, every detail of the day planned with precision. "You really do everything yourself, huh?" he asked quietly, almost in admiration. Sonia didn't look up. "And you think that's a problem?" "No," he said, voice low, "but it's exhausting just watching you." She finally glanced at him, lips twitching with the faintest hint of a smile she didn't allow herself to indulge. "Exhausting. That's a new one." As they drove through the bustling streets of Kingston, Sonia's mind was unusually quiet. Liam's presence was constant, silent but protective. She realized, almost reluctantly, that for the first time in months, she didn't feel entirely alone in her battles. Yet she also knew one thing with certainty. Liam Cox was unpredictable. And unpredictability had a way of either breaking her or awakening something she hadn't felt in years. And Sonia, despite herself, wondered which side of the line she was about to cross. By mid-morning, Sonia's day was already a whirlwind of calls, meetings, and presentations. Liam followed quietly, blending into the background as he drove her from one location to the next. Despite her usual insistence on control, she found herself unconsciously relying on his presence as an anchor. She didn't want to admit she needed at a high-rise downtown. The elevator doors opened to reveal a room buzzing with investors and executives. Sonia strode in with precision, her emerald green blouse and tailored trousers immaculate, heels clicking like a metronome across the polished floor. Liam stepped back, letting her take the lead, hands folded lightly behind his back, observing the room, watching her move. The meeting started. Numbers, projections, and strategies flew across the room, but Sonia delivered each point with flawless confidence. Liam leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes scanning the reactions of the investors. One man whispered to another, impressed by her clarity and authority. Liam's jaw flexed slightly. He'd seen many people lead, but there was something raw, magnetic about her, After the meeting, the team celebrated quietly in the lobby. Sonia barely acknowledged it, already moving toward the elevator to head back. Liam followed. "You don't celebrate," he remarked quietly as the doors closed. Sonia's eyes flicked toward him, sharp. "I don't need to. Success isn't a party. It's results." "Maybe," he said with a sly smile, "but a little recognition doesn't kill anyone." She shook her head, leaning back against the elevator wall. "You're here to drive me, not critique my personality." He chuckled softly. "I know, but someone's got to remind you there's a world beyond the boardroom." For a brief moment, Sonia studied him, how calm he remained in the chaos she thrived in. How effortlessly he seemed to balance patience with quiet challenge. She felt an odd mixture of irritation and intrigue, the kind that made her pulse quicken without warning. As the elevator dinged and they stepped out. Liam held the door, letting her walk ahead. She turned briefly, just enough for a glance that lingered a second too long. Liam caught it and smiled faintly. "You're going to make me regret this," she muttered under her breath, though there was no venom in her tone. "Or," he said quietly, "you'll thank me for it one day." Sonia didn't respond, only tightened her grip on her folder. But deep down, she wondered just how much control she really had donned, whether she wanted to. Later that afternoon, Sonia's phone buzzed insistently in her bag. She didn't glance at it immediately. Habit had her prioritizing the meeting notes, but when she finally did, the message made her pause. "We need to talk. Urgent." Arya, her chest tightened. It had been weeks since she'd seen her daughter, and the thought of Arya reaching out so suddenly sent a mix of relief and unease through her. She shot a quick glance at Liam, who was adjusting the mirrors in the car. Eyes forward but attentive. "Take me home," Sonia said, voice clipped, but steady. Liam's hands didn't hesitate. He knew the tone well enough now. He maneuvered the car smoothly through traffic, avoiding the snarls of rush hour, giving her enough space to compose herself. As they neared the house, Sonia's thoughts spun. What had happened? Why now? Her mind replayed every warning she'd given, every moment she'd felt herself losing control of the chaos that was Arya. And yet, as the familiar driveway came into view, there was a flicker of hope. Maybe she could reach her daughter before the distance became permanent. The door opened before Sonia had time to knock. Arya stood there, disheveled, hair falling in strands over her face, eyes wide but glinting with determination. "Mom?" Her voice cracked, but the single word carried volumes of unspoken apologies and fear. Sonia's heels clicked across the floor as she reached her daughter, arms tightening instinctively around her. "Arya?" she whispered, holding her as though she could keep her safe from every mistake she had ever made. Arya buried her face in Sonia's shoulder. I didn't know what else to do," she murmured. "You came back," Sonia said softly, pulling back slightly to look at her. "That's what matters right now." They stayed like that for a long moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Outside, Liam parked the car and leaned back in his seat, pretending to read a text but listening carefully. Didn't need Sonia to ask, he understood. This was her moment, the one she had been preparing for, bracing herself against for weeks. Finally, Sonia led Arya inside, to the kitchen, letting her sit at the table while she poured tea for both of them. The warm steam rose, filling the space with a fragile sense of calm. "Talk to me," Sonia said gently, her voice low but commanding. "Everything." Now, Arya swallowed, tears threatening again. I messed up. I didn't listen." Sonia shook her head, holding up a hand. "No, not excuses. Tell me the truth." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Arya spoke raw and unfiltered. About her fears, her loneliness, and the choices that had driven her to the brink. Sonia listened without interruption, her face unreadable, but her heart slowly, unclenching. When Arya finally fell silent, Sonia reached across the table, taking her daughter's hand in hers. I've made mistakes too, she admitted. But leaving you to learn the hard way. Can't take that back. It's what I can do. Is make sure you don't have to face it alone anymore. Arya blinked through tears, a fragile smile breaking through. Promise. Sonia nodded, squeezing her hand firmly. Promise. Outside, Liam watched the house for a moment longer before starting the car. He didn't know what had been said inside, but he knew the tides had shifted. The storm wasn't over but for the first time. He could see the calm beginning to settle in the eye. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in Sonia's house began to shift. It wasn't instant and it wasn't perfect, but small cracks of connection started to show. Arya followed her mother's routines, reluctantly at first, but slowly. She began to settle into a rhythm that didn't feel like punishment. Breakfasts were quieter but more frequent. Shared coffee in the morning replaced hurried exchanges, and Sonia softened in ways she hadn't realized she needed. Liam, now fully integrated as her personal driver, found himself part observer, part silent participant. He drove them to meetings, events, and casual errands, quietly noting the subtle tension between mother and daughter and the flickers of warmth that began to emerge. One late afternoon, Sonia's office was unusually quiet. She sat at her desk, reviewing the upcoming investor presentation when Liam knocked lightly and entered. Ma'am, he said, placing a sleek folder on the desk. You asked me to prep the route and timing for tomorrow. Sonia glanced up, finally noticing him. Thank you, Liam. Did you check the backup routes? Every option, ma'am. Traffic reports, alternate streets, even construction alerts. You won't hit a single red light tomorrow, he said smoothly. His confidence unnerving in its calm precision. She studied him for a moment, recognizing that he wasn't just competent. He was attentive in a way that mattered. And maybe, just maybe, there was something more to him than just a driver. Good. You're learning fast, she said, her voice softer than she intended. The following morning, Sonia, Arya, and Liam drove to a charity gala, carefully chosen event Sonia thought could serve as both social and personal rehab for her daughter. Arya sat in the back, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve, while Liam kept his hands steady on the wheel, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror with a protective watchfulness. Relax, Sonia said, noticing Arya's tension. It's just people, food, and conversation. Nothing more. Arya gave a half smile. I'll try. When they arrived, Sonia navigated the crowd with her usual poise, while Arya trailed behind, slowly observing the elegant chaos. Liam stayed at a discreet distance, but his presence gave both mother and daughter a quiet sense of security. Later, as Sonia was engaged in conversation with a potential investor, Arya wandered near the entrance, where a group of teenagers were hosting a charity raffle. She watched them laughing, free and uninhibited, and felt a pang of longing. Liam noticed immediately and stepped closer. Want me to grab you a drink? He asked. Arya shook her head, smiling faintly. No, I just needed to watch for a second. He nodded, not pressing, but his eyes lingered, analyzing, protective. It was clear he was learning the delicate dance of being near Sonia Aunt, now Arya, without overstepping. By the end of the night, Arya had laughed for the first time in weeks, and Sonia had felt a rare lightness she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Driving home, the car was quiet except for the hum of the engine. Finally, Arya broke the silence. Thanks for bringing me tonight, Mom. I think I needed that. Sonia glanced at her in the rearview mirror, her eyes softening. Me too, baby. Me too. Liam, watching from the driver's seat, allowed himself a small, knowing smile. He had arrived in this world by chance. But it was clear now he was part of something bigger, something fragile and precious, that even he couldn't predict. The days that followed felt different in the Arauco household. Sonia noticed the subtle shift, the quiet hum of normalcy threading through the once tense atmosphere. Arya was still cautious, still testing boundaries, but there were small victories. A shared breakfast without an argument. A conversation about school that didn't end in a slammed door, and moments of genuine laughter that surprised even Sonia herself. Liam adapted seamlessly to the household rhythm. He was no longer just a driver. He was a steady presence, quietly observing the ebb and flow between mother and daughter, ready to step in when needed. Sonia, ever aware of appearances and propriety, appreciated his discretion, though she would never admit it aloud. One evening, Sonia returned home from a long day of meetings. The house was unusually quiet. She paused in the foyer, catching the faint aroma of vanilla and cinnamon. Arya was sitting at the dining table, textbooks spread in front of her, a pencil tucked behind her ear. Liam was polishing the silverware at the sideboard, humming softly. Sonia's shoulders eased slightly. "Dinner ready?" she asked. Arya glanced up, eyes brightening. "Almost. Want to help?" Sonia raised an eyebrow. "Do you want me to help you cook?" Arya smirked. "Depends. Can you chop onions without crying?" Sonia allowed herself a small laugh, the first real one in days. "I suppose I can try." Together they moved through the kitchen, a rhythm slowly forming between them. Liam hovered near the stove, offering subtle guidance. "Turn the pan. Watch the heat." His voice low and calm. It was effortless, natural, and somehow grounding after dinner. As Arya cleared the table and Sonia washed dishes, Liam approached. With a folded piece of paper, "Ma'am, your schedule for tomorrow," he said, placing it gently on the counter. Sonia glanced at it, then at him. "Thank you, Liam. You've been helpful." He nodded, an almost imperceptible smile tugging at his lips. "Always, ma'am." As the night deepened, Sonia found herself alone in her study, reviewing reports. Liam knocked lightly and entered, holding a glass of water. "Thought you might need this," he said, placing it beside her keyboard. Sonia looked up, caught off guard. "Thank you," she said softly, a hint of vulnerability in her tone. He lingered, unsure if he should speak or leave. Finally, he broke the silence. "You're doing a lot, ma'am. And you don't always let people see it." Sonia's eyes met his, sharp but tired. "I don't need people to see it, Liam. I need results." He nodded, backing toward the door. "I know. Just don't forget to breathe." Later, Sonia found herself staring out the window, glass of water in hand, replaying his words. House was quiet, the night still, and for the first time, she felt the weight of exhaustion pressing not just on her body, but on her heart. Liam's presence, steady and unassuming, had begun to unsettle something within her, something she wasn't ready to name. Meanwhile, upstairs, Arya lay in bed scrolling through her phone. A message from a friend made her laugh quietly, and she realized how much she had missed. Simple, joyous laughing, teasing, feeling connected. For the first time since returning from her father's, she didn't feel like she was running from or hiding from life. She felt like she was stepping into it. Downstairs, Sonia closed her laptop, finally heading to bed. She paused outside Arya's room, listening to the faint sound of her daughter's laughter. A small, weary smile crept across her face. Maybe, just maybe, they were finding their way back to each other. And somewhere in the shadows of the house, Liam watched, silently aware that he was no longer just a driver. He was part of a story that was still being written, one that promised danger, desire, wrapped in the fragile threads of family and trust. The following week unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Sonia moved through her days with precision. Meetings, calls, and presentations. Each step deliberate, each decision sharp. Yet beneath the surface, a tension had begun to thread through the edges of her life. Subtle but undeniable. Liam proved himself more than just competent. He anticipated her needs before she voiced them, remembered the small details that made her life easier, and moved with a quiet confidence that both irritated and intrigued her. Sonia, ever the controlled force, found herself noticing him more than she should, how his sleeves rolled perfectly, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel when driving, the faint curl of a smile that appeared when he thought no one was looking. One late afternoon, as Sonia prepared to leave the office, Liam held the car door. The sunlight caught his profile just right, the wind lifting strands of his hair. "Traffic's light today," he said, sliding into the driver's seat. "Good," she replied, settling into the back with her laptop bag on her lap. She opened it, scrolling through notes, but the usual crisp focus felt distracted. Her eyes flicked to Liam more than once, noticing small details, a smudge on his collar, the faint scent of cologne he didn't realize he wore, the steady rhythm of his hands on the wheel. "You've been quiet," he observed, his voice casual but probing. "I'm reviewing tomorrow's meeting," she said, not meeting his gaze. He murmured. And the car filled with a silence that was almost electric. Not uncomfortable, but charged, like two magnets aware of their pull. When they arrived at her home, Sonia stepped out and paused at the curb. "You can go," she said, her tone clipped, but betraying nothing. Liam hesitated, holding her gaze. "Ma'am, if you ever need, I know," she interrupted softly. Something in his presence unsettled her, made her heart race in ways it hadn't in years. She turned and walked inside before she could say more. That night, Sonia lay, awake, replaying the day. The sharpness of business had softened just slightly by Liam's quiet efficiency and subtle charm. She chided herself he was just a driver. Nothing more, but the thought refused to leave her. Meanwhile, upstairs, Ria had found her rhythm in her schoolwork and the house's new structure. She tested boundaries, yes, but the absence of constant conflict allowed her to breathe. Still, she noticed the quiet tension between her mother and Liam. It's the way Sonia's gaze lingered slightly longer than necessary. It's the way she adjusted her stance when he entered a room. A weekend arrived, and with it a rare moment of calm. Sonia sat in the study reviewing proposals, while Liam quietly straightened the living room, occasionally glancing her way. Arya appeared in the doorway, oversized hoodie hanging off her shoulders, hair messy. "Mom?" she asked softly. "Yes." "Baby," Sonia replied, closing her laptop. "I just wanted to say thanks for everything." Her voice was small, almost shy. Sonia's eyes softened. "You're welcome, Arya." Liam, watching from across the room, felt the warmth of family. In that moment, yet he also felt the undercurrent, something unspoken, simmering just beneath the surface. Between the mother he now served and the man he was slowly becoming. Sonia turned off the study light, leaving a sliver of moonlight to filter in. As she passed Liam on her way out, their hands brushed briefly. A spark of tension ran through her. She didn't pull away immediately, but the moment ended as quickly as it had arrived. Leaving her heart pounding and her mind restless, Liam, alone in the living room now, allowed himself a quiet exhale. He was no longer just an employee in Sonia's life. He was a presence, a disruption, a thread weaving into her carefully controlled world. And he wasn't about to let that thread unravel quietly. The following Monday morning, the household felt different. There was an almost imperceptible tension, a quiet anticipation in the air. Sonia moved with her usual precision, her heels clicking across the marble floors. But she couldn't shake the feeling of Liam's eyes following her. Noting the smallest gestures, the way she adjusted her sleeve or shifted her weight. Arya, sitting at the breakfast table, scrolled through her phone but kept stealing glances at Liam. He was setting plates, making sure everything was in place, yet there was an ease in his movements that made him seem larger than just a driver. She noticed the way he watched her mother with a kind of unspoken respect. And something stirred in her, a mixture of curiosity and mischief. Sonia poured herself a coffee, her sharp movements betraying the storm of thoughts in her mind. "Liam," she called, voice calm, authoritative. "I need the car at 10. There's a meeting downtown and I can't be late." "Yes, ma'am," he replied smoothly, his tone neutral but carrying a subtle warmth. The morning passed in a blur of calls, emails, and early meetings. Yet every time Sonia glanced at the clock or left her office, she found Liam already waiting. Door opened, keys ready, attention unwavering. There was a consistency to him that both irritated and fascinated her. Later that afternoon, After wrapping up a particularly grueling board presentation, Sonia emerged to find Liam waiting with the car. She hesitated, glancing at him before sliding into the seat. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. "You were late last week," she said finally, eyes forward on the road. "I know," said, hands on the wheel, calm, steady. "Won't happen again?" Sonia's lips pressed into a thin line. She wanted to argue, to reprimand, but the tension of the week, the unexpected weight of his presence, kept her silent. As he drove, the city blurred past the lights, the traffic, the noise, but all Sonia could focus on was him. There was a quiet confidence, a control he exuded that mirrored her own, and it unnerved her. She found herself stealing glances, wondering why someone like him could command her attention without saying a word. "You think too much," Liam said suddenly, breaking the silence. Sonia blinked. "Excuse me, Hugh?" He continued, eyes on the road. "You're always calculating, planning, controlling. You think too much about everything, even me." Sonia stiffened, uncertain if she was annoyed or intrigued. "And you think I should? What, stop?" "No," he said with a slight smirk, just noticeable enough to make her pulse quicken. "Just notice when things aren't about business, when life isn't spreadsheets and slides. Sometimes it's about the small stuff." The car pulled up to her office, and Sonia stepped out, her mind still spinning. She didn't say a word, didn't look back, but she felt it, something shifting. A line being drawn, a tension neither of them had fully acknowledged. That evening, at home, Arya lounged in the living room, homework spread out in front of her, but her attention kept drifting to the staircase. Liam was upstairs tidying, and Sonia was in her study, immersed in late-night work. For the first time in weeks, the house didn't feel like a battlefield. It was charged with something new: possibility, curiosity, and a quiet pull between. The adults who had now unknowingly entered a delicate dance. Arya smirked to herself, sensing the energy in the air. "This is going to get interesting," she whispered, flipping her pencil between her fingers. The next morning, Sonia found herself stepping into the sleek black car, the early sun glinting off its polished surface. Liam was already there, engine running, the quiet hum of the vehicle filling the air. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, voice steady, his eyes briefly meeting hers before returning to the road. "Morning," she replied curtly, sliding into the passenger seat. For a moment, silence hung between them, neither speaking. Sonia's mind raced through her agenda, but she couldn't ignore the way Liam's presence seemed to pull her attention from the spreadsheets. The calls, the relentless pace of her day as they merged into traffic. He drove with effortless skill, weaving past slow-moving cars, taking the quiet streets she usually avoided. "You're unusually quiet today," Liam remarked after a stretch of silence. "Usually you've got a running commentary about the city, the people, the weather." Sonia stiffened, gripping the edge of her seat. "I have a lot on my mind," she said flatly, keeping her eyes fixed on the street ahead. He glanced at her, noticing the subtle tension in her posture. "Not about work?" he asked carefully, voice lower now. Sonia's lips pressed together, and she gave a noncommittal shrug. Not everything can be solved with meetings and numbers. For the first time, Liam allowed himself a small, knowing smirk. "Maybe some things need more than spreadsheets, ma'am," he said softly. Sonia's head snapped slightly toward him, eyebrows raised. "And what exactly are you implying, Mr. Cox?" "Just that sometimes," he replied evenly. "The answers are in the ride, not the destination." She stared at him for a long moment, the weight of his words settling over her like a sudden, unexpected breeze. There was something unnerving, magnetic even, in the way he spoke, calm, precise, but hinting at something deeper, something unspoken. At the office, Sonia stepped out of the car, but she didn't immediately reach for the door. She found herself lingering, glancing at Liam, whose expression remained unreadable but attentive. "Mr. Cox," she said finally, voice tight but controlled, "make sure the car is ready for 5. I have a meeting downtown." Yes, ma'am, he replied smoothly, and before she could move, he added, and ma'am, try not to forget to breathe once in a while. Sonia's chest tightened. It was infuriating and strangely comforting all at once. She nodded stiffly, forcing herself inside the building. By evening, after a long day of meetings and calls, she returned to the car expecting silence, but instead found Liam waiting with the vehicle already started. He gave her a small nod, acknowledging her without speaking, as they drove through the city's golden hour glow. Sonia noticed herself relaxing, letting her guard drop just a fraction. The quiet between them no longer felt tense, it was charged, electric. Filled with the possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider. "You're quiet again," Liam said, breaking the silence. "I've been busy," Sonia replied, though she didn't meet his eyes or thinking too much. He said softly. She frowned, resisting the urge to retort, but the words lingered, echoing in her mind. Maybe, just maybe, he was right by the time they arrived home. Sonia realized she had spent more time thinking about him than about her endless to-do lists. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself a small, private smile. Upstairs, Arya watched from the landing, phone in hand, eyes sharp. She didn't need to see the exchange to know something was shifting. A mischievous grin spread across her face. "Oh, this is going to be fun," she whispered. That evening, sudden call came through Sonia's office line just as she was about to settle into her late-night emails. "Ma'am, it's been an issue at the downtown project site." The voice on the line said urgent, but controlled. "They need immediate oversight. Couldn't reach you on your mobile." Sonia's jaw tightened. Another last-minute crisis. She glanced at the clock. 8:15 p.m. traffic at this hour would be brutal. Without hesitation, she pressed the intercom. "Liam, we're leaving now." Within minutes, he appeared at the door, keys in hand, ready. No complaints, no questions, just the same calm. Steady presence she had come to rely on. The city lights blurred past as Liam weaved through traffic with precision, his focus unwavering. Sonia, strapped into the passenger seat, clutched her folder tightly. But her mind couldn't ignore the unspoken tension in the air. "You're unusually quiet tonight," Liam said, breaking the silence, voice low. "Not focused on the presentation. Focused on the problem at hand," she replied sharply, though the edge in her voice softened slightly under his gaze. They arrived at the site in record time. The team gathered in anxious clusters around a half-finished building. Sonia stepped out, heels clicking against the pavement. But as soon as she saw the chaos, her calm, commanding demeanor kicked in. Liam remained by the car, observing, ready to step in if needed. But when a security guard approached, pointing toward a dangerous scaffold situation, Sonia's hand shot up, stopping him mid-explanation. "I've got this," she said firmly. Then, turning toward Liam, who had now joined her, she added, "Stay close and don't interfere unless I tell you to." He gave a small, amused smile, but didn't argue. There was something about the way she commanded authority, sharp, unyielding, and magnetics, that both frustrated and intrigued him. Hours passed as she coordinated the crew, assessed safety risks, and made crucial decisions on the spot. By the time the immediate crisis was resolved, the night had deepened, streetlights casting long shadows across the site. Sonia leaned against the rail, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Liam stepped beside her, hands in his pockets, eyes on the illuminated building. "You make this look easy," he said quietly. Sonia didn't answer immediately. Her gaze stayed fixed on the site, but a faint smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Easy isn't the word I'd use," she said, finally glancing at him. "Necessary." "Necessary," he repeated, almost like tasting the word. Then, after a pause, he said, "You always carry it all on your shoulders, huh?" She exhaled sharply. "Somebody has to. It's what it means to lead." Liam studied her, the intensity in her eyes, the quiet strength she radiated. "You're exhausting," he said, half teasing, half admiring. "And you don't even..." Realize it. Sonia's lips twitched, a flicker of amusement breaking through the exhaustion. I have my moments, she said, voice softening. A long silence settled between them. Then, unexpectedly, Liam spoke again, voice steady, almost daring. You know, not everything has to be carried alone. Sonia's eyes met his, sharp and calculating, searching for some hidden motive. There was none. Just sincerity, raw and unguarded, for the first time in a long while. She felt a flicker of relief, not from solving the problem, not from the adrenaline, but from the presence of someone beside her who wasn't trying to compete or control. Just be there. The car ride back was quiet, the city lights streaming past, the hum of the engine a steady rhythm. Sonia found herself leaning back slightly, letting her shoulders relax for the first time that day. Liam noticed, and for a brief moment, the space between them felt charged. But comfortable, a rare pause in a life that rarely allowed her one by the time they pulled into the driveway. Sonia realized something had shifted, not dramatically, not overtly, but subtly, undeniably, as she stepped out. She didn't immediately turn away. Instead, she looked at him, curiosity and something else, something warmer flickering in her gaze. Liam raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile tugging at his lips. We survived, he said simply. Yes, Sonia replied, voice low, almost a whisper, for now. And though the night was still and the city alive around them, both of them understood that the real challenge, the tangled, quiet, invisible tension between them, was only beginning. The following Friday evening, the city shimmered with the glow of streetlights, the faint hum of nightlife threading through the air. Sonia adjusted the cuff of her emerald blouse as she stepped into the lobby of the Hyries Gala venue, heels clicking against marble floors. The event was elegant, exclusive, curated to perfection, exactly the kind of setting she thrived in. Liam trailed behind her, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit, the subtle scent of cologne drifting past her. He carried the aura of a man who belonged, yet remained distinctly separate, an enigma Sonia hadn't yet fully placed. The moment they entered, a wave of activities swept around them. Socialites mingling, champagne glasses tinkling, a soft jazz quartet tucked in the corner. But Sonia's focus was singular: clients, investors, her reputation. Liam, however, seemed attuned to everything else, the whispers, the stares, the undercurrent of tension that threaded through every interaction. Stick close, Sonia murmured, as she swept past a cluster of people. I don't need anyone brushing past me tonight. Noted, he replied, voice low, eyes scanning the room. But don't think I won't save you if someone tries. She glanced at him sharply, surprised by the unexpected edge of protectiveness in his tone. I can handle myself, she said, though the faint warmth in her chest betrayed her otherwise. Minutes passed, and the gala unfolded in a seamless rhythm of laughter, networking, and polite applause. Yet Sonia couldn't shake the sensation of being watched, not by any single person, but by the entire room, attuned to her every move. She noticed Liam's presence behind her, steady and grounding. And she realized how unnervingly easy it was to rely on him without admitting it. At the center of the room, Sonia's eyes locked with an investor she'd been trying to impress for months. She moved toward him with practiced confidence, but before she could extend her hand, a waiter stumbled, nearly spilling a tray of champagne. In a reflex, Liam moved first, steadying the waiter, then intercepting a glass that had teetered dangerously. Close to Sonia's arm? Thanks, she said, voice soft uncharacteristically. As she steadied herself, no problem, he replied, his gaze locking onto hers for a brief, silent acknowledgement. It was fleeting, but it left a lingering heat she hadn't expected. The night wore on. Conversations weaving into negotiations, laughter softening into cautious smiles. At one point, Sonia excused herself to take a call in the corner. Liam remained nearby, hands folded, patient but alert. When she ended the call, she found him still waiting, unflinching. "You always manage to show up when I least expect it," she said, a hint of challenge in her voice. "I pay attention," he said simply, shrugging as though that explained everything. Sonia's lips twitched, a small, reluctant smile. She hadn't realized how rare it was to encounter someone who could match her stride without stepping on it. And yet, despite herself, she found comfort in it, as the gala reached its crescendo. The final toast prepared and glasses raised, Sonia noticed a subtle shift in the room, a momentary lull as eyes darted toward her. She straightened, voice smooth, commanding attention. But when she turned back, Liam's presence was all the more pronounced. He wasn't just standing behind her. He was a quiet anchor, unspoken and steady. And in that instant, Sonia understood that the walls she'd built, brick by brick, for control and power, were being quietly challenged not by confrontation, but by consistency, by someone who refused to be ignored. The night wasn't over, and neither were the stakes. But for the first time in a long while, Sonia felt the beginnings of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Possibility, the following Monday. Sonia arrived at the office earlier than usual, the morning sun streaming through the glass walls of her suite. She moved with precision, reviewing the client's dossier, outlining every detail for the upcoming high-stakes presentation. Today was critical. The deal could shift the company's trajectory, and there was no room for error. Liam waited discreetly. In the corner, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, perfectly still, eyes following her every move. When Sonia finally noticed him, she didn't flinch. Instead, she gave a curt nod. "You'll drive me to the client's office," she said without preamble. "And make sure everything runs smoothly. I can't afford distractions." "Yes, ma'am," he replied, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "Distractions aren't my style." Sonia scoffed lightly, adjusting her blazer. "Good, keep it that way." The drive was quiet, the city waking slowly around them. Liam navigated through traffic with effortless skill, weaving through side streets and boulevards with a calm that made Sonia almost relax. But she couldn't afford to relax. Not today. At the client's office, the team gathered, the air thick with anticipation. Sonia set up her laptop, double-checked her slides, and glanced at Liam, who stood slightly behind her, observing quietly. There was something grounding about his presence, a silent assurance she couldn't explain. The meeting began. Sonia's voice was crisp, commanding every point precise and calculated. Investors leaned forward, captivated by her clarity and expertise. Yet, beneath her composure, Sonia was aware of Liam's subtle gestures, his unobtrusive scanning of the room, the small nods that confirmed her timing, his quiet alertness to any potential disruption. Midway through the presentation, a sudden technical glitch froze her slides. The room murmured. Sonia's pulse quickened. But before panic could set in, Liam stepped forward. "Miss Orocco, the backup drive is ready," he said calmly. Handing her a sleek USB, his timing was perfect, seamless, almost invisible to everyone else. Sonia regained her composure, inserting the drive and resuming her presentation without missing a beat. The investors, oblivious to the near crisis, applauded as she concluded with a strong final slide. After the meeting, the client team offered enthusiastic congratulations. Sonia's expression remained stoic, though inside a spark of satisfaction flickered. Liam stood beside her as she gathered her belongings. "You make it look effortless," he said quietly, almost teasing. "Because it has to be," she replied, glancing at him. Her words were clipped, but her tone softened slightly. He gave a knowing nod, saying nothing further. Yet as they exited the building, the quiet chemistry between them was palpable. Charged with unspoken acknowledgement, mutual respect, edged with something deeper, something neither wanted to name just yet. Back in the car, the city stretched out before them, lights glimmering, traffic humming. Sonia leaned back, finally allowing herself a brief exhale. Liam's eyes flicked to her in the rearview mirror. A hint of amusement and something more lingering there. Not bad for a first day on the job, she murmured almost to herself. Not bad at all, he replied, voice low, carrying the weight of a challenge, unspoken. And for the first time in months, Sonia realized that perhaps, just perhaps, having someone by her side, having someone unexpected, didn't have to compromise her control. That evening, Sonia's phone buzzed incessantly on her desk. She ignored it at first, buried in reports, until a sharp ping made her glance at the screen. Emergency. Client meeting pushed to tonight. You're leaving in 30. Sonia sighed, already slipping into her tailored jacket. She glanced toward the office entrance. Liam had been quietly organizing the car, ready as always. Looks like it's you and me again, she said, sliding into the back seat, her tone calm but edged with fatigue. Wouldn't have it any other way, Liam replied, smoothly, closing the door behind her. His confidence always understated. Al felt like a tether keeping her steady. Traffic was heavier than usual, the streets slick from a sudden evening drizzle. Sonia leaned back, reviewing her notes, fingers tapping rhythmically against the folder. Liam's hands gripped the wheel with quiet precision, eyes scanning every intersection. The hum of the engine and the soft patter of rain became the backdrop of their uneasy camaraderie. Halfway to the client's office, a sudden screech of tires cut through the rain. A car had spun out ahead, blocking the lane entirely. Liam's reaction was immediate, instinctive. He swerved skillfully, tires skidding slightly on wet asphalt, keeping them safe while avoiding the stalled vehicle. Sonia's breath caught, a flicker of surprise and admiration crossing her face. Not bad, she muttered, more impressed than she intended. Not bad at all, Liam echoed, a faint smirk in his voice. But I suggest holding on. It's going to get bumpier. The incident seemed to break some unspoken tension between them. For the next few minutes, as Liam expertly navigated detours and slick streets, Sonia allowed herself a rare pause. She realized just how much she had relied on his quiet competence. How much she had underestimated the effect of having someone she could trust completely. Finally, they arrived. The building loomed in the rain-soaked night, lights reflecting in the puddles like scattered jewels. Sonia stepped out, the heels clicking against the marble as she walked toward the entrance. Liam followed, umbrella held over her with effortless precision. Inside, the emergency meeting unfolded. Investors were tense, frustrated at the last-minute rescheduling. Sonia commanded the room, her presence magnetic. Yet her mind kept drifting to Liam. The way he had handled the drive, the way he had steadied her without saying a word. She hadn't realized how much she needed that anchor. After the meeting, she stepped out into the quiet night, rain still falling softly. Liam held the car door open, rain dripping from his curls, suit clinging slightly to his frame. You handled that well, he said quietly, almost casually. Of course I did, she replied, brushing a hand down her jacket. But there was a softness in her voice, an acknowledgement of the night's shared intensity. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he started the car, the engine purring as rain-slicked streets reflected city lights. For the first time, silence between them was intense or charged with frustration. It was shared, intimate. A quiet understanding forming in the space between professional boundaries and something more. Sonia stared out the window. Rain dripping down glass, and for a fleeting moment she wondered what if she didn't always have to carry the storm alone? Liam glanced at her from the rearview mirror, eyes catching hers for just a second. That single look held a promise neither would speak aloud yet, but both understood perfectly. The city rolled past, a blur of neon and rain, and for once, Sonia didn't feel completely alone. To be continued.